Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Iris Fox, and I want to extend a warm welcome to the Rough Edges podcast. Rough Edges exists to provide mental health education as well as faith-based messages in order to inspire growth and foster healing. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create a voice for those who wish to discover more about these topics. My hope is that this podcast will not only shed light on mental health issues, but will also reveal the intersection between faith and mental illness in order to bring growth and healing in our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. We are in our fourth season, all about mental health and the media. And today I have a very special guest with me. You probably remember her from way back in season one, but I am joined by Marilette Sanchez. Marilette Sanchez is a wife and mother of 5 young kids first, but put some coffee and a pen in her hand, and she is unstoppable. She and her husband Moses work for the Christian nonprofit organization Crew, working alongside marriages and families. A New York City native, Marilette is known for her transparency and her ability to inject her love of pop culture into her discussions of relationships and marriage. Follow her parenting and homeschooling journey on Instagram at Big City Big Family, and Marilette's musings on womanhood and pop culture at marillettesanchez.com and thinkchristian.net. Welcome back, Marilette.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Hello to everybody listening in.
Yes, I am so excited because you are not only were you my first guest, but you're also my first returning guest. So that is
It's an
like a
honor.
plus.
It's just an
Yeah.
extension of all our long phone conversations that we tend to have on on mental health, pop culture. Like this is so perfect for us too.
Yes, yes, I agree. So, Marilette, for those people who don't know or are just tuning in for the first time, what are 3 things that you are passionate about and why?
Ooh, this is good. Coffee. I just came back from a trip to Rome, Italy to visit my sister. Well, she's in Sicily, but like I came back and I'm like, it just like I can't do American coffee, like drip coffee anymore. So I have now a mocha pot and I make myself strong coffee. It's not technically espresso, but strong coffee in the mocha pot. And I froth my own almond milk now. So I'm like, I go to bed sometimes and I'm like, oh, I can't wait for my first sip of coffee. Like, no lie. I'm just like, I look forward to my coffee. Passionate about also, like, I think friendships are very healing and like, yeah, they're just, we're not, a phrase that I keep living by is we're not human doings, we're human beings. And so like friends help us really live life and just be instead of just always being productive. Like as an American, it's all about being productive. So friendships. Um the last one, I guess I would say media because I can't pick like if it's just music or movies. Like I'll just encompass everything. But yeah, I just think I guess or I could say art in general. That will make it even more broad. But I love like media, music, and I can't imagine living without like listening to music or yeah, watching a movie. Like Moses and I, my husband, we did a rewatch of all the Hunger Games. I'm like, this is so good, like to rewatch it. And I mean, it was always good, but it was released when there were so many like dystopian young adult,
Hmm.
series, and so it was kind of a little bit lost in that. But to rewatch it with fresh eyes, it's like I was even thinking like as a parent, you mentioned I'm a mom of 5 young kids, like to think how young they were when they had to go into the arena, just like
Mm.
such a tangent, but like yeah, it makes you think about life. I like art. It makes you reflect on life. So yeah, coffee.
Wow.
What did I say? Coffee and friendships and art.
Media. Yep.
Media or art.
Yes. I love that. And it's so perfect because today we are going into mental health and media. And in particular, we are talking about Selena Gomez's new documentary called My Mind and Me. And
Hmm.
so, going into it, a quick summary, the official summary of this documentary is: after years in the limelight, Selena Gomez achieves unimaginable stardom. But just as she reaches a new peak, an unexpected turn pulls her into darkness. An intimate study which spans her 6 year journey into a new light. And this documentary can be found on Apple TV. You would have to, get a subscription and all of that, but it is definitely worth it, I would say. And before we get into our discussion, I would like to give a disclaimer. We will be talking about spoilers for the documentary. So if you have not watched it yet, please watch it and then come back and listen to our discussion. So, Marilette, let's talk about our initial thoughts. Like, what were your initial thoughts, like, right after seeing the documentary?
I mean, so I would say it was heavy to watch, but also it was refreshing. So, like, as a person with a mental illness, it was very refreshing to see like a real portrayal of what it's like. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more in detail, but just yeah, those two words, refreshing and but also emotionally heavy. So, warning, like, be in a good headspace when you watch it, I think. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I thought it was also very heavy because it goes into in depth about like her mental state and just the pressures of celebrity life, and it also mentioned another type of trigger warning. It's like mentions of
mhm,
suicidal ideation,
yeah,
anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and all the things that come with that. And so that's really where the heaviness comes from for me as well. And then it's also, as you said, it's very refreshing. I found it very inspiring because
yeah,
while there was a lot of stuff going on, there was still like a hopeful element to it that, hey, it doesn't have to be the end. Like, this is a hopeful resolution. Like, you
that's
can
true.
move past this. So I agree with you.
Inspiring, that's a good word. Yep. I would agree with that.
Yeah. And so, um, following our initial thoughts on the documentary, which moments would you say accurately depicted mental health in your opinion?
It's so hard to pick one, but one that sticks out is the very beginning where she's just being really negative about like her body image and like just like she's practicing for her big tour and she's like, "Oh, nothing's going right." Like just yeah, that's really relatable and like when you can just be in a spiral and it's like everybody else around you is like, "No, it's fine." But in your head, it's like everything couldn't be worse, you know? Like so
Yeah.
yeah, that was one big one, but I'll let you answer before I give more examples because you're nodding your
Yeah.
head, so I feel like you have something to say about
Oh
that
yeah, of
that
course.
particular moment.
Uh, yeah, so I agree with that definitely. Like the way it opened was just like very interesting because it kind of depicts her inner monologue versus like her actual situation. And like you
Mhm.
said, she was like very like negative about herself, her body image. She said certain parts of her body looked weird in an outfit, so they had to scrap it. And it's so funny to me. Well, not haha funny, but it's just ironic. Um
Mhm.
that the song Who Says is playing
True.
during her rehearsal.
Yeah.
And that song is all about like accepting your beauty, loving yourself, being confident in who you are. And then it's just juxtaposed with, oh, I feel insecure. I hate this about myself. I'm self doubting. So, yes, I would say that that's a perfect moment about
Mhm.
that.
And I think whether you have an actual, like a clinical mental illness or not, that's still that could relate to a lot of people. Like you think
Hmm.
celebrities have it all together, but they struggle with stuff too, like insecurities. And so that was again another reason why I think it was refreshing is because she, as a celebrity, is so different. She's way. I'm not saying she's the only celebrity, but she's very relatable and very transparent in her struggles, and I
Hmm.
really appreciate that about her.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Especially like I just like the way that things were depicted. Like it wasn't glamorizing mental health. It wasn't like making it seem like, oh, that was just a quirk in her personality and it's cute and it's funny because like a lot of the times with media, they depict mental health. I mean, they're getting better at this, but a lot
Hmm.
of the times mental health is depicted as like either really dangerous or really quirky and sexy. And I like how the documentary framed it as no, it's heavy. Like this stuff is like really real struggles and challenges that you go through, especially it's heightened, especially if you have like a clinical mental disorder. And so another moment for me that kind of depicted mental health in a really great and I would say accurate light is when she was calling her parents post her manic episode. So it's kind of I'm a little going out of order here, but
Yeah.
it's like following the who says scene, like the whole introduction about her rehearsing for her tour. She had to cancel her tour because she did have a manic episode during that time, and just showing that the shame and the just guilt that she was feeling post episode, like when she was calling her parents and she was just like, I treated you guys poorly, I was saying like very harsh things to you. And you know, it's really hard to watch because especially as you know people who have experienced it in the past, it's just very shameful and you feel ashamed of the things that you said and did in the moment when you couldn't even remember half of the things you said and did. You just remember,
Hmm.
okay, I did really bad things, but you don't know like to the extent that it really affected like you know close family and friends. So I thought that was very realistic in terms of like her grappling with the shame and grappling with like, okay, this really hurt people and this is affecting a lot of people and I don't even know the extent of how much it affects others.
Hmm. That's true. I found it interesting though, like when they were kind of describing that her manic episode, they didn't actually use the word. They said
True.
psychosis, which again, you can have manic episode with or without psychosis. I had it with psychosis. If you listen to my, the earlier episode that I recorded, but I just found it interesting because I'm like, we're going this in depth about talking about bipolar, but we're not going to use the word. I wonder
Yeah.
whose choice that was. So, and I guess maybe people, it's too much of a word that people don't know about. So like, like people use the word mania loosely, like in general, like, oh, that person is, in mania. Like when, yeah, I think it's a general
Yeah.
term, but I don't know. I just found that interesting. I just would love to ask the producer or the editor or whoever's in charge, like, why didn't you guys use that word? Like, it's obvious if if you have experience with bipolar, that's what happened. But if you don't, I
Right.
wonder if that that's what happened.
Yeah, that's a good point because they didn't explicitly say like it was a manic episode.
They didn't. They
Um
said she was hospitalized and they said she had
yeah,
psychosis.
right, right. So they didn't really say it was mania because mania usually triggers the psychosis, you know? So like it was just very interesting. I kind of picked up on that too because I'm like, this is a manic episode. This is
Yeah,
it's not it's not
exactly.
just right. So
I
that's
mean,
a
I
good
guess
point.
possibly it could have been hypomania, but either way, they didn't use either word. So just an aside.
True.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, is this the shame that's ingrained in our culture? Like, I
True.
think, yeah, the only way you get away from the shame is to like name things, call things what they are. So,
Yeah.
but again, that's not to take away from the general, like what she did through the whole documentary. Just a thought.
Yeah. No, no, no. That's honestly a good point because that kind of segues into my next question of are there any areas do you think that they could have improved in terms of like, you know, depicting mental health or are there just like things that they could have done like how you mentioned they could have mentioned mania but they
Hmm.
didn't. Like are there any other areas of the documentary that you felt okay, this could have been handled better
Yeah.
or yeah.
I think I'm going to be nitpicky, but like, I wonder why she didn't really talk about therapy or medication. Because those are big
Yes.
realities for someone with bipolar. Like, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think she needs to go into detail like what medication she has, but like, it would have been nice to have like a little mention of like, oh yeah, she's open about, oh, this is a healing process. Like when she had that big speech at that dinner, she talks
Yeah.
about like, I'm kind of in tune with my, I have more of a positive mindset than I've ever had before. Like I'm sure she was very on, real about that. But yeah, I just wonder why she didn't talk about therapy. Or I mean, maybe she doesn't do therapy. I don't know. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Yeah.
just I found that interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that was like a big issue that I had with the documentary was that therapy wasn't highlighted, medications weren't really highlighted, even nutrition wasn't really highlighted. I found
Hmm.
that interesting. I think the main focus of the documentary was more of like the pressures of being a celebrity with having mental illness. And I think it could have been advertised as that instead of like, okay, this is my experience with having a mental health condition, with having bipolar disorder. Because if you're going to show how it's affecting her on a personal level and her day to day life, why not show her efforts to get better in the process, you know?
Hmm.
So, and I think this is also a thing that's very popular with movies and TV shows, especially depicting mental health. It's just that you have the problem, and the problem is so like exacerbated and so big, and
Hmm.
then cut to 3 years later, oh, I'm
I'm
healed.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just like, what was the process? Like, what did you go through? So yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Hmm. I mean, maybe she's not ready to tell that part of her story, so I'm not going to hold her to it.
Right.
And she's not, she didn't ask to be like a poster child for mental health. So, like,
Yes.
yeah, I don't hold it against her. Like, she shared what she felt comfortable sharing at the time, which I still appreciate. As somebody with bipolar, she did a lot,
Yeah.
in that one documentary. She accomplished a lot. So, yeah, not trying to knock her, but yeah, yeah, it's a good question. Like, what could they have improved on? So,
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like it did do, the documentary did do a great job in terms of like raising awareness and just like showing like bipolar disorder from like a celebrity perspective. And that's something I don't think we've seen too
yeah,
often because
we've
we,
seen Kanye.
yeah,
That's a whole other episode.
yeah, I know. Oh Lord, yeah,
Goodness.
that's a different
Pandora's box.
case.
We're not gonna get into it, but to the point of like everything is like extreme version. What gets portrayed in media is extreme. So
Yeah,
what was refreshing about Selena is like she really seems like the everyday person. Like this could happen to
right.
anybody, and that's the beauty of this documentary. It's like, yes, there's scenes of her celebrity, but really at the core, it's her as a human, and
Yeah,
that's why it did such a great job being relatable and refreshing and a voice to the everyday person. Because
yes,
yeah, again, that's a general problem within the media is like extreme versions of what what that mental illness looks like, and not
right,
the everyday, like how this affects your personal relationships. And we talked about the shame and the guilt with your family member. Like that's the stuff that, yeah, doesn't get talked about often.
right, right. No, definitely. I agree with that. And that kind of segues into the next question that I had, which is, what lessons or main takeaways did you have from the documentary in terms of like how it was depicted in the film? Mental health was depicted.
Okay, I mean, I don't know if this answers your question that well, but like if you follow my blog, like I'm so big about like praying for celebrities, and this just confirmed that's like I'm
Mm,
gonna keep praying for celebrities because like you never know like the inner battles that they're going through. And like, I mean, we're recording this around the time of, we just lost a celebrity, Twitch, to
yeah,
suicide. And like I just been that's been weighing heavy on my heart. It's like people can put happy facades all the time and you don't know where they are. Like someone
mm,
put it, I forget now who posted it, but someone's like, you don't know people's private ledge. And so it's
mm,
like, yeah, I don't know, just to have compassion for people, to pray for people, but especially celebrities. We tend to think they're like superhuman demigods, like they're invincible, but they
yeah,
have struggles. And like as
right,
believers, like another thing I appreciate about the documentary is how open she is about her faith. And like,
Yes.
yeah, like you could be a Christian and you could be a celebrity and you could have struggles, you know? So just to, yeah, just to have more of a, let's be the hands and feet, and like not join in the criticism of celebrities. I'm not saying all celebrities are perfect, but I'm saying we don't need to add to like, let's just gossip about them and be condescending towards them. Like, let's have compassion, let's pray for them, you know. So that was my main takeaway. I know that's not going to be everybody's takeaway, but yeah. And then apart from that, just again feeling seen as somebody with bipolar disorder. I've definitely felt seen.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. I The main takeaways that I had was that um even with having bipolar disorder, that's not really the end of your story. And I think a lot of the times it's like when you're dealing with something like this, or you're dealing with a mental health condition in general, you kind of feel like this is the end all be all, or this is it. Like, once I get this diagnosis, like this is the rest of my life
Mm-hmm.
forever. And it's really, that's not true. And I just love how the documentary just depicts the hope behind it all. Like, as you said, she was very open about her faith, and I just love how she was using it not just to be like, oh yeah, this is what I believe in and this is like the end all be all, but she used it as like her main source of coping, her main source of finding hope,
Mm-hmm.
and just showing that hope does come from God, and he is the source of our hope, and hope helps us move through our healing process. And so I loved how that was depicted as well. And I another thing that I took away from the documentary is that learning about your diagnosis is always important.
Mm-hmm.
And I love one scene where she was talking about how her mother gave her a book about thunderstorms,
Mm-hmm.
and she was just very scared of thunderstorms, and her mother gave her a book to learn about them. And she said, once I learned about what actually causes a thunderstorm, like how they operate, I wasn't really scared about it anymore. And I think that directly correlates to how we think about getting a diagnosis, because a lot of the times we think it's like a death sentence or a label that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. But once you get to learn more about, especially like with me specifically, learning more about bipolar disorder and learning more about how I can best manage it, that's helped me see it in a different way. It's helped me learn that, okay, I have this diagnosis, but I can manage it, and it's not like the core of my identity. And so I really appreciate the documentary for depicting those things.
Yeah, that thunderstorm parallel definitely stuck with me too. That was really good. And it's true,
Yeah.
like I didn't, you know, I didn't have that, you know, when I got my diagnosis. I wish I had that word picture. That was a good word picture. But I think the same thing happened to me. It's like the more I learned about it, the science behind it and the treatments that are available, it's like, yeah, it became, you know, you're scared of things because they're unknown. You're scared of things because they're mysterious. But like when you take away some of that mystery, then the anxiousness also leaves, you know? So that was a really good parallel that she used.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I use this platform to encourage people, especially people who are getting their diagnosis for the first time, because I remember when I first got my diagnosis, and it was very crushing, and it was very just like very daunting to me, and I'm just like, I don't understand like what this is, like how do I have this? And so just to kind of encourage people who are just learning about what they have, like what mental conditions that they're dealing with, like it's okay to learn more about it. And a diagnosis is just information about what you're going through internally. It's not saying, okay, this is who you are for the rest of your life, like this is your identity shift. Like, no,
Mhm.
it's just information about what you're going through on the inside. So
Yeah,
I really
it's
appreciate
neutral.
that.
It's not like,
Yes.
I think we tend to get inundated with the message that like this is a character flaw, and I think we have to
Mhm.
differentiate from that. Like, not, you're not a bad person because you have a mental illness. You're not a, like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like deformed almost. Like, you, I
Yeah.
feel like there's like a perception of mental illness that like, okay, now again, like you said, we make it our identity, but it's just
Mm,
our brain works differently, you know. Like you wouldn't, you know,
right.
thankfully there's less stigma against things like autism, like
Yeah.
brains work differently. So that's something to me that I've had to, you know, rewire my thinking, my brain of just like, okay, this is, first of all, it's not my fault. There's nothing I could have done to like have a different, yes, for me, I had a manic episode because I was under acute stress, but other, and so I can make choices to make my stress level go down. But there's nothing I could have done to not get this diagnosis. Like this is just,
Right.
as a believer, my philosophy is like, well, we live in a fallen world with sickness, with death. This is just one effect of that is mental illness. Like our brain is sick.
Mhm.
So even when I talk
Mhm.
to my kids are 10 and under, like they remember that time of me, like so we got them out of the house pretty soon after I started my manic episode, but like they remember me screaming like and so they were, that was 2 years ago, so they were young. And but I'm like, when I talk to them, like I try not to like, oh, let's not talk about that. I don't do that. Like I say my mommy's brain was sick, and it's like,
Mhm.
okay, that's enough for them to be like, they don't, they didn't even think twice about it. They're like, okay, on to the next thing, like let me go play with my Legos. Like we put the pressure and the stigma when it's like we can't talk about it matter of factly, like I think, even we talk about this a lot, but like within the church, the silence, I don't think that
Mhm.
helps. Like it makes it this, again, this mysterious thing that like, oh, you can't, it's a shameful thing. And it's like, oh, I'm, yes, we've made strides, but I'm like, I wish we would we would be even better, especially within the church. Like we could be the leaders in this
Yeah.
conversation, and we're kind of behind. So
Yeah.
yeah. So it was, again, she did a great job, even representing a Christian, that was really refreshing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a couple of things about what you said that really resonated with me. It's just like you teaching your kids. I mean, that's very important to kind of just let the next generation know that these topics are okay to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I think about like older generations in the past, like mental health, they didn't even like fathom like having conversations
They didn't
about
have the
it. And
language for it.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, but you're right. It's just something that shouldn't be taboo anymore. And it's
Hmm.
just like you're brushing it under the rug doesn't really help. And it's like if you cover the chair, that doesn't make the chair disappear, you know? Like
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
still there. So,
Yes.
covering it up is just not something that's helpful. And I think also the church, I think another issue that we kind of have to work on is just not over spiritualizing it, because there's like an additional layer of stigma in the church where it's like you're going through a psychological issue, you must be demon possessed. And that is just something I wish we could move away from, because it's just like it's not a demon possession. As you said, your brain is sick, it operates differently, and it just needs help. The same way your physical body could get sick, your brain can also get sick because it is also a part of your body. So,
Hmm.
it may seem like these are like general ideas and things that are scientifically based, but if you have like the spiritual component of it, I feel like it's really hard to balance the two, because in the church we're always like, taught to think, okay, what's the spiritual aspect behind this? Or what's going on in your prayer life? What's going on in your walk with God? Like, what is going on? And
Hmm.
that's a whole nother episode as well. But
Yeah.
just, I agree with you. Like, we have a lot of work to do in the church, especially.
Yeah, I think it's reducing us to just being spiritual, and that's not a Christian belief. Like a Christian
Right.
biblical belief is we are body, soul, spirit. So
Hmm.
yeah, we have a real body that we have to take care of. And like I think about like how when I was younger, I used to think like you die, you go to heaven and you're just floating around. But like no, like it's a new heaven, new earth. We're gonna have a body that doesn't get sick, that is renewed, that is perfect the way that God intended. And like, if God didn't care about bodies, why would he go through all that trouble to give us new bodies in the new earth?
Right.
Like he could have just like, oh, bodies are too much trouble, let's just be spirits. Like he could do that. Like angels are purely spiritual beings. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, just it does go back to like basic philosophy that we adopt as the church without like even realizing it. Because you're right, like I think about with like depression, right? As an example, it's like, oh, you need to pray more. Like you don't have enough faith. Like God could heal you if you just prayed. Like yes, there's an element of praying and an element of like surrendering to God and stuff like that. And that, that's a big part of my healing process was just being in my word and replacing all those negative thoughts. But again, it's not just that. Like I had to change my lifestyle. Like I had to remove like toxic relationships in my life. That was a big thing for me. Like I had to, because that was a source of stress for me because I was such a people pleaser. Like,
Mhm.
the growth that I've noticed in myself just by like making those hard moves in my personal life. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, nutrition, you mentioned, like diet, like I mean, I haven't been the best at exercise, but like I do more than I've done before because it's all related. Like
Yeah.
it all affects you. So sleep, protecting my sleep, that's something that before I was diagnosed, I didn't even think about that. Like I would just stay up really late. So yeah, it just again, getting a diagnosis, it just gives you information on how to best deal with the way that your body is. Again, it's a neutral fact. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just yeah, knowing the information helps you make better choices for you.
Yes. Yes, I definitely agree with that. And so we talked a little bit about celebrity culture and the pressures of being a celebrity and dealing with mental health. So I think we touched on this a little bit, but what do you think, like, in addition to what we were saying before, like, what do you think about how the film addresses, like, the pressures of celebrity culture and how celebrities deal with mental health?
So yeah, to have like to point to a specific scene, I remember a scene where like she's just trying to get food and the paparazzi are harassing her. Like there's no
Yeah.
pretty way to say it, but like it's she and Justin had been broken up for who knows how long, and they're just like, how are you doing with Justin? And just like antagonizing her. Like it was hard to watch. Like I know that stuff happens, but I can't it's hard for me to
Mm,
watch that stuff. And I'm just like our culture allows that. Like especially in America, like especially, LA. I don't live there, but where we don't give celebrities like human decency. Like we don't
mm,
know how to treat them with just a level of respect. Like we think we own them as the public, and
yeah.
that bothers me. Like that shouldn't be. And I you hear all the time like people are like, well, they asked to be artists or they asked to be actresses, and that's just part of the territory. But I'm like, it doesn't need to be. They just wanted
Mhm.
to create art and inspire people, and why do we have to harass them? Like there should be a line. But I don't know how to fix that because it's just like it's
Yeah.
so ingrained. Like we think we own them, and it's just really that has always bothered me. So yeah, so then yeah, so I think that adds to the pressure that they're feeling, like on top of just even personal relational struggles that the everyday person has. Like they have that, I don't have to deal with that. I can go to the grocery store and not worry about people with cameras. Like that's exploitation if you think about it. Like
Yeah.
you're taking pictures of somebody that they didn't ask you to take. Like you wouldn't do that as a photographer, like a regular photographer, just take random pictures. Um so yeah, that needs to change. I don't know how, but there's something inherently wrong in that paparazzi culture. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because we just idolize celebrities way too often. And I think there's a difference between appreciating somebody for the art that they create and then creating like a unhealthy obsession with the person just because you love like their movies, their music and all of that. And I would say there's nothing wrong with admiring celebrities and like their talent and their creativity. But if we're going to go as far as like harassing them just to get a picture, just to sell it to a tabloid, or you see them eating or you see them like actually doing like normal human things and you go like bombard them and be like, oh my God, it's come on. Like, I agree. We need to restore human decency to celebrities. And also, I did want to mention like Selena's entourage through the documentary because I feel like celebrities they have a lot of like yes men and they don't have a lot of friends who would
Hmm.
actually tell them like the reality of their situation. And I feel like one person in particular, especially when Selena was coming back from the London tour and she was just like
Mm-hmm.
over it.
Yeah.
And she had an encounter with one of like the people in her entourage, and they're just like, "Oh, you're kind of like," I'm paraphrasing here, but
Yeah.
it's just like, "Oh, in a way, like you're ungrateful for all the opportunities that you've been given, and like how could you not want to do the work that you're doing?" And it's just not coming from a place of, "Oh, I understand what you're going through," as the pressures of being a celebrity, the stress of like sitting through all these like silly interviews and doing these weird quizzes and games, like not really feeling that you have much of a purpose and it's like empty and shallow. Like instead of acknowledging that, she's just like, "Oh, you need to be grateful for the opportunities that you have because a lot of people would kill to be in a position like you." And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just another thing that you were bringing up. It's just like, "Oh, you asked for this. Like, this comes with the territory." And it's just like, not a lot of them did. Like, I think of Jeanette McCurdy and how she was just pushed into celebrity culture through her parents and specifically her mom. It's just like that pressure as a child actor, even.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just not fair that we don't see celebrities as human beings. We often see them as the sum total of their music, what they say, or
Yeah.
who they are, like in the public eye, but we don't really give them, the time to be human. So I
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah. To go back to that scene, like I thought it was like it would have been wise for her to have a break between her trip. Where was that trip? I forget now.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like she went from Kenya to
Kenya
London, and then
straight
she
to
was
like
going
the
back.
press interviews, and
Yeah,
I'm like, she should have had. You think about even when you do like a mission trip, right? It was very similar to like a mission trip. Like you need time to debrief, you need time to
yeah,
de-stress and like ponder what happened, and she didn't get
yeah,
any of that, and then to have it be so juxtaposed, like it's not even like, oh, she went back to everyday life, she went back to like being in the spotlight. Like she had no time to process. So it's like
yeah,
she even admitted, she's like, this is culture shock. That's the word she used, and I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, she should have had some more time to process. And
yeah,
she didn't know, like she couldn't have expected it, and you know, but yeah, I think that would have helped her make that transition probably a little bit better if she had some leeway between doing those interviews.
yeah.
So
True.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's very true. But speaking of celebrities, one more time, this is the final
Mhm.
question on
Yeah.
celebrity culture. But do you think that celebrities should be allowed to be the representative of mental health issues? Why or why not?
There's a lot of loaded words in that question. So like what makes someone a celebrity? What makes someone like define representative? Like cuz like to me, if you define representative as like a perfect picture and like poster child, like no, I don't think they need to do that, cuz again, to reiterate the point, they're human. So they're not going to do the best job every time, and there's always going to be people with expectations of that they didn't do that good enough. Like we even did it in the, even in our critique of like, oh, I wish they did that. So like, yeah, I don't like, but it depends how you define it. So like, what she did in her film was she raised awareness, right? So like,
Yeah.
that's great, but I think just our expectation should be celebrities can share whatever part of their story they want to share, as I said earlier. Like even with the everyday person, it's you don't owe anybody your story. Like that's something I had to learn the hard way, is like I don't
Mhm.
owe transparency to anybody. Like if I feel safe to share it, I'll share it, but I don't have to tell you everything. So that's just a boundary thing. So I don't Yeah, this goes back to like, are we treating celebrities with decency? Like, are we giving them a private life? Like, can they be a human being as opposed to just an entity? That would be a philosophical question to ask, of like, am I expecting this person to be more than just who they are? So like, yeah, if we define our terms, I could probably do a better job answering. But again, I don't think anybody needs to be a poster child, and I don't think anybody owes their story to anybody.
Right.
So just be
Right.
grateful for what they give us, because if you think about it, a lot of celebrities are also, artists. They're either actresses or musicians, so they give so much to us already through their art. Like, why do we need more? Like, I think about
Right.
a big part of the documentary was "Lose You to Love Me." Like, that's real. Like, that's like one of my favorite songs from her. Like, because it's just so honest about heartbreak, and also like learning learning boundaries again, like being making sure you're prioritizing yourself and not just giving your all to somebody else without first self-care. Like, that's such a big theme of my life, as a mom, as a minister. It's like I need to make sure I take care of myself, or else I have nothing to give to other people. And she's
Right.
been really open, even in past interviews, of like, she gave everything to that relationship. And like, she knows the fault that she also brought into that relationship. She wasn't just blame gaming, he did everything wrong. So again, yeah, they already give us so much through their art. Like, what more do you want from them? Like, now I feel like you're using them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, no, no. I agree, and the reason why I phrased it as like representative, because I don't think when celebrities talk about mental health, we see them as advocates. We see them as the face of that particular thing.
Hmm.
Like, and especially I was in like my intake when I was like first released from the hospital. I was doing an intake with a particular therapist, and she was saying that, giving me models of people who also have bipolar disorder.
That's
And she was
interesting.
giving me all these celebrities. And
Oh,
I'm
that's
just
so
like,
interesting.
yeah, I'm just like, she's just like, look at Selena Gomez, look at Demi Lovato. And I'm just
So
like,
strange.
okay, but like, why are they synonymous with
Yeah,
the mental
they're
health
getting
condition?
equated
It's,
with.
yeah, so I agree with you that they shouldn't be the poster child. But a lot of the times when a celebrity, shares that they're
Hmm.
struggling with like either anxiety, depression, or bipolar disorder, they're just like roped into talking about it.
Yeah.
Now in every interview, they're just like, well, what do you think about this aspect of bipolar disorder? And it's
Yeah.
just like, when did I become the spokesperson for that? I
Yeah.
was just sharing. So I think representative is kind of like it is a heavy term, but at the same time, it's just like that's what they are pegged to be as a celebrity. And I think a lot of the pressure comes from people expecting them to use their platform to solve every issue imaginable.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not okay, because it's just like my platform is used for something else. Now, that you can apply that to anybody, like
Hmm.
even like with the podcast that I'm doing right now, it's just like I can't attack every single mental health issue out there. I could try, but like
Hmm.
it's not realistic of me to just think, okay, I have a podcast about mental health. I should be doing more
Hmm.
for mental health in general. I don't think you should put that type of pressure on
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
So that's where that question kind of came from, because I noticed like even like interviews outside of her documentary, like after it was released, she was talking, I forget which magazine she was talking to, but she was saying how she feels like she can't have children because of
Okay.
medication. And so a lot of people gave a lot of backlash, especially in the bipolar community, because there's like, that's just not true. Like, you shouldn't, hold yourself back just because you feel like medication would hold you back from that. So I'm just like, well, if she wasn't placed in the position to be the spokesperson for these issues, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it all boils down to like us unfairly putting the pressure on celebrities to be the face of all these national issues.
Hmm. I get what you're saying, but now I want to like get into the nitty gritty of what she said, but we might not have time, because I think that has she was open in the documentary even about like she wanted kids. Like, she was holding, I think it was a niece or nephew, it was a baby. I don't know if it was a blood
Yeah.
relative, but like you could tell, like she admitted, like, I want to be a mom. Like, that's my dream, is to be a mom. So like, to even hear her say something like that is heartbreaking to think about. Like, she thinks that she can't have kids. And I don't know, I wish people would have had some compassion on her instead of attacking her, like, again, to your point, because it's like that's what she thinks is possible. And then also, like, those of us with kids with bipolar, I think about, like, that's a privilege, you know, like I don't know if I would have the same like mindset as her if I had the added pressure of celebrity. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have the capacity to think about, oh, I need to bring somebody else because I'm just trying to manage. And then to add
Right.
to that is like she had the lupus thing. We didn't even get into that. Like she
Yes.
has physical illness that like ails her everyday life. Like she's in pain. So like I
Mm,
I understand why she doesn't I can understand why she would think that that would be impossible because there's so many things on her plate that's not on the everyday person's plate. So like, yeah,
right.
can we just have compassion? Like, so
Yeah. No, that's true. And I'm looking at the article now. It was about well, she told Rolling Stone that she wasn't sure that she was ready to have kids. Yeah, she thought that the medication would cause complications in fertility, and she wasn't sure if she was going to be able to even have kids. So, when
so
she
again,
said,
it's the headlines that made it more dramatic than it
yeah,
was.
of
She's
course.
just saying she's not sure. She never said, "Oh, I'm never having kids," or
Right.
"Everybody with bipolar can't have kids." Like she never said those things.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Again.
everything gets turned into a tagline. That's the problem too in our
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah,
So
but I'm just saying, like, it. But I think she was. I wouldn't say that she was like coerced to say anything like that. But I just feel like she felt the pressure of having to speak on these issues, like according to the questions that were being asked. And it's a lot of the times like we assume that just because somebody shares something about a particular issue, they are automatically the spokesperson of that
yeah.
issue. And so I mean, even us being women of color, like a lot of the times, especially if we're in predominantly white spaces and we're the only one, we're often expected to be the spokesperson for the entire diaspora. And that's not fair, you know? So, yeah, in talking about like the pressure of celebrities and everything, and in light of this documentary, um, what advice or words of encouragement do you have for those who are struggling with mental health issues, or if you want to talk about like how to pray for celebrities, that would be a good thing to just close with. But anything you want, like advice or just how to go about praying for celebrities.
Maybe, yeah, because I feel like I gave advice that they could re-listen to the other one. But the praying for, I could one piece of advice is like your don't compare your journey to anybody else's. I think is a big thing, especially
Mm,
now as the conversation is opening up about mental health in like social media world in the media. Like the temptation is real to be like, oh well, that person has this sickness and whatever. Like it's easy to compare. That's the culture of social media. But it's like, just you and I talk about this too, like celebrate the small wins. I think that's a huge thing. um but second of all, it's like celebrate, yeah, just celebrate how far you've come. Like think about even 1 month ago or 1 year ago. Like how have you grown just in your own, even in your own personal journey of like how you relate to others or how you relate to yourself. Like how have you improved on that? Like let's celebrate that, because it's easy to be like, well, I'm still struggling with this, like I still have negative thoughts, or I still like I need people's approval for everything. Like yes, that's probably true, and maybe that's a lifelong issue that you're going to have. But like how have you grown? So like for me, like I've grown in like self-care. Like before I get to the point of like when I'm super stressed, I can tell like, oh, I'm feeling anxious, I'm like blowing up at my kids. Okay, it's time for a timeout. It's time for me to like do something that's just fun for me. Like I'm always doing something for other people, as a homeschool mom, as I mentioned, like as a minister. Like I I'm so good at serving, but like how can I just take a time out to be like do something fun? So
mm,
yeah, whether that's just calling up a friend or like something I like to do is just like window shop. That's just my thing. Like I don't need to buy anything, even if it's like online. It's like, oh, that's nice. Like decorate my house, interior design, that kind of thing. So what yeah, before you get to the point of like being overly stressed, which for people with bipolar disorder, that's a trigger. um how do I grow in self-care. Okay, but the other question though about how to pray for celebrities, um, I don't know. I feel like I would love to, like, if someone is interested in that, I wish they would just message me so we can have a conversation. Because it's like, it's not something I'm like, oh, I'm the expert in, but it's just, I've always had compassion. Like, I used to watch, I don't know, you're too young for this, Sarah, but VH1, like biopics basically on like MTV, VH1.
Okay.
And I was just like always
Yeah.
enamored by like celebrities, like their upbringing and how they came to fame. And I don't know, that's just been a fascination of mine. Like I would say even before I was a believer, that was a thing for me. It's like, oh, that's, how people have gotten to where they are. And then as I become a believer, growing in just like my prayer walk, like just my own, I'm very real with God. Like that's just how I am. Like I've never had like a filter. So like sometimes like prayer journaling is a really big thing for me. I just write out prayers. Like if I'm stressed out, I'm just like, God, this is so annoying. Like that's just how I am. Um so yeah, like I think I just feel like that's the bedrock of like praying for celebrities is like how is your prayer life in general, because then as you kind of foster that and like nurture that realness with God, then you can then be like, okay, God, show me like those people, even if it's not celebrities, like those people on the outskirts that like you go the next step to be like, to not just feel bad, but to be like, God, like, can you help that person? So it's a, again, you need these
Mhm.
bedrock things in order to get to that. um so yeah, like having a real prayer walk with God, and then the other part is like learning about celebrities, but having an eye to be like, oh, like their life is not perfect. Like just because they have money, just because they have fame doesn't mean their life is perfect. Like what are, even ask that prayer as
Right.
you're watching a movie or listening to an interview or something, like, God, like what is something that you want me to pray for them? Like, and I just genuinely believe like if you have the posture of like, God, help me pray for these celebrities, like he'll give you what to pray for. So as an example, like I remember vividly, I was pregnant with Eliana, my second, and like I couldn't sleep, which is probably a bad sign now that I think of it. But like I was praying. It was like at the time that Justin Bieber, funny enough, was going through like DUI, like a lot of stuff, and it was like I prayed, and I have this prayer still. I wish I had it in front of me, but like it's like, God, how cool would it be? I have it in a prayer journal. God, how cool would it be if like Justin Bieber hit rock bottom for the world to see, which he was doing at the time, but like you, God, like just had a, like I knew Justin had a background in the church. um, so I'm like, what if you brought him back to his
Mhm.
roots and his first love, and the whole world would see? So I wrote that years ago. And like, if you see, like, I'm not saying he's a
Mhm.
perfect person or a perfect spokesperson for Christianity, but you see how his faith has grown in the past couple of years. And I'm just like, wow, God, like you listen to my prayers. Like that really kind of encouraged me, like, okay, like keep doing that. Like he may never know, and nobody else necessarily needs to know that I did that, but between me and God, like I know he answered that prayer for me.
Thank you so much, Marilette, for just discussing this documentary with me and for, just returning. It's always awesome to have you. You're such a wise woman and you just have such a wealth of information, especially about pop culture and celebrities. So you can get more of Marilette as mentioned in her bio at Big City Big Family on Instagram or on her blog, MarilletteSanchez.com or thinkchristian.net. So stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to Rough Edges. This podcast is available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and more. For more updates on the Rough Edges podcast, please follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast. You can also visit the official podcast website at www.roughedgespodcast.com. If you have any questions or further suggestions for how this podcast can grow, please email at rough.edges.podcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.